Hello, Ipswich. Thanks for tuning in to Dialogue with Dr. Hart. I'm very pleased to have my guests be the four principals of our four schools here at the Ipswich Public Schools. I have with me high school principal Dave Dalton, middle school principal Dave Fabrizio, Doyon principal Sheila Conley, and Winthrop principal Sheila McAdams. And we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about Ipswich Public Schools. We're full-fledged into budget season, so we're going to also try to share with folks where we are, what are some of the successes and challenges we have associated with the budget season, and also talk a little bit about education and what we hope and what our hopes and dreams are for the Ipswich Public Schools. So I'm looking forward to a great half an hour or so together with this stellar team of administrators, and why don't we just get started then? So one of the things, just to warm things up a little bit, is to ask the principals to respond to what brought you to Ipswich Public Schools.
My entire teaching career and administrative career have been in larger schools. So when I was looking for my first principalship, I was looking for a medium-sized school where you can make more of an effect on a smaller group of children, a smaller group of teachers, get small class sizes, get and actually work with the kids. You get to a larger school, it's more almost a management. I wanted to actually be in a hands-on teaching. Ipswich came available, it was a perfect fit, and I'm here.
Yeah, great.
Hi, I'm Sheila Conley. I came to Ipswich after being in New York for 20 years. I had grown up in this area. Actually started my student teaching in Georgetown. I went to Exeter, New Hampshire for a couple of years. Was in New York for 20 years. Taught elementary, taught middle school, and then became an assistant principal. And then when I decided I wanted to come back home to New England and looking for a school district, I found that Ipswich had a position available, and I was thrilled to be able to be hired here because it is the right fit. The size of the community, the size of the school, and lo and behold, the wonderful people I work with. So that's what brought me here.
Great. Thanks.
And I like to say that I fell into teaching because that was not my life plan. And when I first moved to Boston, it was with a group of girlfriends, and I started teaching in Boston Public Schools, and I found it was quite regimented. There was very little voice and very little option and choice for either students or teachers. So I was doing some grant work out of one of the local colleges, doing some teacher instruction, and found myself in Ipswich, and where there was voice and choice and options, and that's why I stayed.
And I came to Ipswich much by chance. I joke with a lot of folks that I've met over the years that it wasn't until the principal from Ipswich High School, who was Steve Furtado at the time, called me to recruit me as a substitute that I even knew Ipswich had a high school. I knew of Cranes Beach, but I didn't know about the high school. So that was my introduction. And it was a match that worked out right from the beginning. I quickly acclimated to the culture, and I think really appreciated some of the work that was going on with the leadership, and was particularly impressed by the fact that it was really grassroots at the time, bottom up. Teachers were really part of the process of really the evolution of a teaching and learning vision in this community, and that ultimately is what kept me here. Yeah.
Great. We got everybody there, right? Okay. So the next piece is something that's very unique to Ipswich, I think, and at least in my experience, is the longevity of people that come here. People come here, talented people come here, they stay here, and they stay here over time. And so I guess a broader question is, why do you think that's the case? And maybe if that has impacted why you stay here, tell the audience a little bit about that.
I'll go again. I think the bottom line is the kids here are just wonderful. I've been a number of places, as I said before. It's just so much fun to go to school every day. The kids, they're polite, they're enthusiastic, great sense of humor, well-grounded. There's very little entitlement, just nice kids. So it makes going to work fun every day. And then, that's a reflection of their parents, which is a reflection of the community. The community is a well-grounded place. People are very nice. They go out of the way to help you. They're very polite when they come and talk to you. Whether they have a disagreement or not, it's a nice discourse it's just a nice place to be. And teachers have come, like you said, they're here and they're dedicated staff because they love being here. It's an honor to serve in this community.
Yeah. I was, so it's for me, I've been in a number of different schools, and I don't know why it's unique here, but I think it is. As I walk through the halls, and I'm the superintendent, you know, a lot of times kids don't even know who the superintendent is or that you have a superintendent. But I'll walk through the hall, they'll say, "Hey, Dr. Hart, how are you?" And they'll sit and chat with me. I met with middle school students, I don't know, about a week ago with what I call subs with the superintendent, to ask them for feedback on what we should be focusing on in the school systems. And they were bright, articulate, well-mannered kids. They were just a pleasure to be with. So it makes a big difference. Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, mirror the same conversation as far as it is the students and the dedicated staff. It also reaches out to the parents. As an elementary principal, you can't have a school as successful as the Ipswich Schools without having the parent involvement. We're also very fortunate to have community involvement. We have a number of seniors who come and read with our students during the day, volunteer in our classrooms, help out with our after-school program, and it's what makes Ipswich special, that it's not only a community of supporting education, but also each individual building.
So we hear a lot of talk, both in our district, but outside in the broader community context, that the world's a changing place. It's a rapidly changing place, and therefore education needs to change too. What do you see as some of the key components to the changes we need to have in education?
You know, I can start on that. Certainly, you know, there's a lot that's changed, and in other ways, there's a lot that hasn't changed. I mean, foundational learning is still important, you know, and there's certainly a requirement for schools to teach children the basics, and that's sort of always been, you know, our responsibility. But I think what I've seen over the years is that how we do that and what we expect students to be able to do with that foundational knowledge has really sort of, the bar's really gotten higher on that. And, you know, a lot of what drives our thinking and our practice is research from, you know, the workforce. Certainly higher ed always weighs in as well. But we're being asked to produce kids that can perform. Whether that's a public speaking requirement, whether that's a high level of writing and an ability to analyze difficult text. Certainly the skills that we've talked about around collaboration, communication, and perseverance, some of the habits work that we've talked about, or the 21st century skills that we talk about. You know, there's a shift there that these are becoming much more important and to our students if they're to be successful post-schooling experience. Yeah. So, you know, that to me has been sort of some of the biggest shifts that I've seen over the last years. It's come and gone in different forms over 30 years. Yeah. But that one certainly seems to be sticking more and more. It's just we use different language sometimes and different vocabulary, but really that's the essence of what we're requiring kids to do, and then our challenge is how do we create environments for students to gain that access.
And I'll add to yours, Dave. I think there are two major drivers right now. One is that the world has become quite small, and our students are part of that shrinking world. And the second is simply the infusion of technology in the world in which we live in. So I often think that we've made the pace of learning, we've taken a pace of learning that used to be a little meandering as kids developed and kind of found their way, and made it, we put it on the high-speed train, because we are getting, the expectation is that kids can do when they come out. What's changed for internally is that the knowledge base that we used to give them, that we all felt was appropriate for every child, strangely enough, is outdated often before they walk out the door. So no longer is it beneficial to give to make them experts, because what we're making them experts of is not going to help them 5 years from now. So instead, the focus is once again shifted to all of those what used to be called soft skills or 21st century skills, and those are the skills of being a learner, being able to function in an ever-changing world, and being flexible and making that adjustment. So how do we teach kids that, on top of giving them enough base knowledge to have a place to start?
And I also think the shift of whole class instruction, in so many classes, the teacher would be in the front of the room, your children are in their seats and they're all listening to you. Now as you walk into classrooms, it is so important to have some of that whole class, but then that small group instruction, and then the collaboration of children learning together, problem solving together, using the technology. There are some children in the elementary schools who are more astute with some of the technology than the adult in the front of the room. They can show, they can do, because it changes so fast. And I think that also that mutual respect is a little bit different, because children in all the buildings, what they can share out and what we can share out as the educators, and it's fascinating, but that really is a shift.
I think if you haven't been in a classroom in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you would be shocked by what you see in the classroom you walk in today. The collaboration is the big part, the lack of teacher domination, now student engaged classrooms, the technology they can share within the classroom, without the classroom, around the world. It's a totally different place than it was just a few years ago, and it's going to be ever changing. And as Sheila mentioned, we have to give them the skills to be ever changing. We can't tell them, you need to know this right now, because that's going to be gone tomorrow. But if we give them the skills to be critical thinkers and problem solvers and communicators and collaborators, then moving forward, they're going to be very successful. So our charge has changed a lot just in the last few years.
Really, I mean, what I heard is this whole sense of having a community of learners, that learning, the ability to learn well, is critically important today, because that has to continue over time and over a lifetime, and what you need to learn changes so rapidly. It's so to have those solid skill sets, the residual impact of doing that well impacts the rest of your life. And so our charge here is really quite important. Yeah, thanks. So how have things changed over the last several years here in Ipswich?
I'll start, because I've been here 3 years, and in 3 years, there's been the change we just spoke about, how classrooms have changed. But one thing we've been faced with is because of budgetary constraints, those actions would take place in a classroom with 20, 21 kids. So the teachers would go around and work with the kids would collaborate. Now those actions take place with a class of 28 to 30. And it's just not conducive to learning. So some kids are not getting what they need to move ahead, because of the number of kids in the class and the constraints on time because of that.
And I would say that education is notoriously slow with their changes, and while everything you read professionally, everything that we hear from higher ed or from businesses tell us we need these kind of changes, the fact is the systems by which the education has to occur have not necessarily changed. So the expectations of kids on assessments, state assessments, don't allow a lot of movement. The opportunity, the lack of resources, or this freedom that we talked about that drove us here or brought us here, is much more top-down restricted because of the systems that education has in place. So I think that there's a chafing going on in the Ipswich Public Schools, and it's the chafing against knowing what we need to do for kids and what we're able to do for kids based on the restrictions that are in front of us.
Yeah, real interesting point, and to try to balance that, because that testing environment is certainly, we want accountability, but it does seem to have tension between that and being able to create those creative thinkers and creative problem solvers, and we're getting there. If anybody can do it, Ipswich Public Schools can. We have the team to get that done well. Dave, you made some reference to some of our budget challenges, and so I'd like us to talk a little bit about what have been some of the long-term? Because these budget constraints and challenges didn't just arrive last year or this year. They've been with us for now several years. And so what's kind of the cumulative impact of that? And then what are some of the more recent cuts? We came into this year with a little over 19 positions that were eliminated. They were here last year, they're not here this year. And so if we could talk to both of those, kind of the long cumulative impact and what this impact this year has been.
I'll start with that. I think that the visible appearance of sort of cuts in the budget when we look back really began in about 2009 at the high school. And you know, we went through a period of time where we were making cuts at the end of a budget year for the next year, and then sometimes there was some additional state money that would come back over the summer, and there might be a putback or two here or there. But those putbacks, I think people lose track that those putbacks don't become part of the base budget in the next year necessarily. They're not part of that operating base budget. So what's happened to the high school over time is that we've had this attrition of positions, and positions in the high school equate to sections and seats for students in those particular sections. So really since 2009 we've had this slow erosion of numbers of sections, our ability to use staffing that had we kept, we may have been able to address some creative programming. So we haven't been able to really add some of the programs that really our students should be getting access to at this point in time, particularly talking about the environment that we just spoke about. We've lost programs, we've lost elective programming. We're offering fewer elective programmings today as a result of that. The most recent budget contains cuts in art. We would reduce an art position by 0.6, which basically means we lose anywhere from 3 to 6 sections of art classes for our students next year. We'll eliminate the entire drama program in this target budget scenario. We'll also begin to dismantle our foreign language program. Not any less significant is that we'll be making significant cuts within what's left of our appropriated budget in athletics, which will force us to increase fees significantly to our student athletes. So this direction that we're heading in runs counter to sort of our charge of the direction we should be moving in terms of creating opportunities for our students, and it's putting more emphasis on fees, increase in fees for our students. So it's really a disturbing sort of trend budgetarily.
I mean, it's tough. I remember as a kid playing 3 sports a year all through, at that point it was junior high school, and you never have to worry about a fee. You always had all of the equipment you needed, you had the coaches you needed. And so we're not unique in having fees, but we have pretty healthy fees, right? If for one student to participate in 3 sports, it's $650?
$650 currently, and again looking at increasing it maybe as much as $200 just to account for the loss. And that's a great point. I mean, we hear more and more we're having, what's already a difficult thing to do is to reach out and ask for help when you have trouble with fees. That's difficult for anybody to do, and you wonder when you create a scenario like that, how many people don't even ask and just choose not to participate. So that's not something that is without significant impact, and families have to decide between paying for X or having their child play maybe only one sport. Those are tough decisions to be making as a family.
Very tough, very tough. Anybody else?
The same goes with not only paying fees for sports, but we're also something that had never happened before was they're paying for busing, and that's all the way through. And at Doyon, the entire school would to either take the bus or their parents pick them up. We have no walkers at Doyon, so when you talk about financial restraints, and these are the same families who have children at the middle school, the high school, paying bus fees and then athletic fees, and that is something that is changed in Ipswich from so many people who had children in the schools even 5 or 10 years ago. And, but as far as cuts at Doyon, just in the last few years, we pride ourselves in our class sizes, and I think some of the cuts through the years ends up being towards the secondary because we want our youngest learners to be in an environment that is 18, 20, 22, that's appropriate for that grade level. As we talked about the learning, and it's not all just sitting at their desks. As I have a classroom that's at 25 to 27 in the current third grade, it's not conducive to good learning at that age. One of the ways we've been able to save our class sizes is the things that other people don't see. We do not have a full-time art teacher. We do not have a full-time librarian or media specialist as times have changed. That position has changed, but we don't have that position. So we've cut within the elementary building on some of those. And unfortunately for this current budget, in order to meet the needs of the children within the classroom setting, even with the high third grade classroom, I've had to cut band, fourth and fifth grade band, fourth and fifth grade chorus, the strings program. Unfortunately, we had to cut the fourth grade strings last year. We're now cutting the fifth grade strings this year. And Ipswich is proud of their arts program. It's what makes Ipswich a real cornerstone for not only the North Shore, Massachusetts, but nationally. And we're cutting that from our elementary in order to meet this budget. And that's where it's really getting tougher and tougher. And we're eroding into the things that, $8,000 when it comes to supplies and materials. And you're like, oh, that's okay. But that's supplies and materials just to find the money to be able to, that is hitting home at this point for every single child and family.
Thank you.
And it's kind of well documented the problems at the middle school over the past 3 years. 3 years ago, we had full middle school model classes of 20, 21 students, and through cuts now, we are, instead of having 6 social studies teachers, we have 5 ELE teachers, 5 math teachers, 5 science teachers, only 1 language teacher. We're down to 5 related arts teachers. And because of that, our class sizes are up. Right now we have 9 classes in the school that have 28 or more students. 3 of those classes have 30. Going into next year, unless we make some structural changes how we run a middle school, those numbers are going to go up to even more classes. And at the middle school level, it's so important that we capture these kids. It's a tough time. You're going through so many changes, and then to have 30 kids in your class, it's unfair. It's not a good practice. Our teachers have done a great job of staying creative and differentiated. The kids have been great, but the cracks are going to start to show. For every kid you put in that class, there's 1 student you can't get to help if they need help. And with the current budget as it stands for next year, we're in the same situation. So we have 2 options. We throw 28, 30 kids in a bunch of classes, or we start changing the middle school structure, which has been a proven structure where you can build a relationship with kids and help them get through the tough years. So we have a lot of tough decisions to make in the next couple of weeks on how we're going to run our middle school.
Yeah,
And I want to play off from that a little bit, Dave, because I think that as in our roles as principals, we are expected to be fiscally responsible for taxpayer dollars. And I think that we take that job very, very seriously. So we look at it very carefully, and every budget process requires us to look fresh eyes, where are we? We all do that, but I think what we're feeling more and more over the last couple of years is that even in doing that, we are making decisions that are painful. Not just decisions, well, I'll hold off on something, but I think of it a little bit like a hope jar. All families have a little hope jar, and we hope to be able to do this, and we hope to be able to do that. The hopes used to be grandiose. Now they're hopes about not putting 30 kids in a class. They're hopes about not having to raise fees at a high school. And the death of hope is excruciating, and that's what we see.
Yeah.
Well put.
Great summative comments, Sheila. Thank you. So let's talk about hope to wrap up this segment of Dialogue with Dr. Hart. Let's strip away some of the challenges and say, if we're sitting here 5 years from now and we're wildly successful, what are some of the things that will have happened? what will be different? What will we be enthusiastic about?
Well, I think that we're so fortunate with the FEFI's grants. They were able to move technology forward in our district, which you've said many times, it's a game changer. And with a correct, appropriate budget and this game-changing FEFI's, 5 years from now, we should be the leading educational system in the state, if not the country. We have all the pieces in place to have all this collaboration and powerful learning experiences and teaching kids to be critical thinkers. And I see collaboration across classrooms, across buildings, across the country, where we're doing all these cutting edge things and our kids are moving forward past everybody. It's there. We have the kids, we have a dedicated staff, we have a community who wants this. We just have to put all these pieces together. And I see just great things for the school system. It's all out there. We're starting to do it now, but there's roadblocks now. We get rid of those roadblocks, the future is incredibly bright.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Yeah. Anybody else?
Yeah, I'd chime in, and it's very similar in terms of thinking about, really it's about all of the resources that we have coming together to sort of produce this incredible educational machine that, is impactful on so many levels. And, one of the places that I know we're all challenged with now, because it's just another part of the change in education today, is we're all being asked to really personalize learning for our students. And that's one of those newer pieces. It's not a one-size-fits-all education anymore, and that's not the expectation. And so, one of the things that I hope to see over the next 5 years is the ability for us to inspire and to connect with kids on a personal level, whether that be interest-based, just with the activities we're offering. More importantly, though, in that core curriculum, giving them a pathway that excites them, that energizes them, so that they fully engage in their full educational experience. And to me, that's going to require really the community willing to rethink how we use resources, particularly at secondary level, because it looks very different. When you're going to personalize for kids and you're going to allow them to choose these interest-based pathways and maybe experience and learn differently because of it, we need to build a common understanding around that and have resources that support it. And that in turn, I think, will just send our kids, our collective kids, off in just incredible directions and exciting futures.
Great, thanks. Anybody else?
I'll just add to all of that, because I think that's all true for us. But we talk a lot about breaking down the walls in a school and taking the learning outside of that. We have the absolute best community to, as a learning community, all of us support these inquiry-based, student-empowered kind of quests, if you will, or interest-based driven learning pieces. And I think that we've seen the community come in a lot. They do a lot of the after-school programming for us. They come in at the secondary level. They're primed for it. We're primed for it with our attention on the right things, not about just delivering some knowledge that won't be useful as we move on. And in my mind, I see actually much more engaged citizens in Ipswich that are under the age of 18, that are very actively involved.
Great.
We've spent some time talking about STEAM.
Yes.
And, science, technology, engineering, the arts, and math. And in order to move forward in all of those initiatives, we need to have those resources to help us, to make us be able to not only learn those subject areas, but to be able to explore in those subject areas in all the examples that everyone else gave. And I think we think of in the past of some of those just being subject areas. When you blend them all together, it's going to be what gets our students to where we want them to be and what they'll have to offer to the town and want to stay in Ipswich. One of the beauties of Ipswich is so many parents come and say, I went to this school, I'm here. They're here to stay. And in order to have them here to stay and have things to offer, I think we need to invest in that.
Well, great. Some great thinking there. Do you know what's interesting as I watch and listen to the administrative team here is that everybody lit up with this last question. It's when you talk about where we want to be in the future, listening to you, that feels so clear, and you're clearly enthusiastic about it. And so I'm confident over the next few years will get this community support, that this team and all of the adults that you work with and the students and the parents of Ipswich will come together to bring that exciting, innovative, really model type of system to fruition. And so I asked the community to keep engaged. This spring is an important spring for the Ipswich Public Schools. There's a lot of information out there on our website, and I will continue to have these ICAM programs and sessions at the school and finance committee meetings and school committee meetings where all of the information for an informed consumer will be there, and people will be able to decide what they want for the future of Ipswich Public Schools. So I want to thank the administrative team for today, but more importantly for what they do every day for the children of Ipswich Public Schools, and I want to thank the community for tuning in. Thank you.